All right. I call to order this Thursday, December 12th, meeting of the Moab City Planning Commission at 6:04 p.m. In attendance tonight, we have city staff Corey Shirtleff, planning commissioners Carolyn Conant, Miles Lofton, myself, Kai Marienfeld, and Mikkel Layton. We also have city staff Kelsey Garcia. Awesome. In attendance, hello. And some other members of the public here in the audience who I assume will be introduced when their relevant items come up. First item of business tonight is citizens to be heard. So with that, is anyone here for citizens to be heard versus an actual item on the agenda? All right, great. And we did not receive any comments through the city's comment portal or via email as well. Next item of business is approval of minutes from our November 14th, 2024 regular meeting. If anyone has had the opportunity to look those over, if there's any corrections or discussion we need to have, otherwise we can entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
I'll motion to approve the minutes from the November 14th, 2024 regular meeting of the Moab City Planning Commission.
Okay, we have a motion by Carolyn. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second from Miles. Any other discussion? All right. All in favor? Aye. Okay. Motion passes unanimously. Next item of business is a public hearing. This is item 4.1, which is a public hearing in consideration of possible recommendation for Moab Ordinance 2025-01, an ordinance amending Moab Municipal Code Title 17, Chapter 17.93, Sign Code, Section 17.93.060, Roof Signs, to be regulated in alignment with general freestanding sign requirements and counted as a freestanding sign if utilizing these regulations, making sign design more consistent regardless of mounting or installation style. This is a public hearing, a briefing, and then a possible action by the commission. Corey, whenever we are ready.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And of course, my Zoom has quit me, so I'm not actually in Zoom land. We are still running and recording, it appears. So as I'm trying to reestablish Zoom, I can't share screen until we do.
Okay.
Just a brief introduction, then maybe invite the applicant up to provide the background and narrative surrounding the proposed amendment. So within the process, the applicant has submitted the development code text amendment process similar to that of a zone change, where any interest within the city limits can submit for a text amendment, has that option to adjust the code. What we're looking at here specifically is within the sign code, roof signs in particular are regulated in a way that they are restricted to a certain height perspective to that roof pitch or the peak of the roof. So with our downtown, we have many single-story roofs in a 40-foot maximum height limit zone, freestanding signs being up to 28 feet. However, for a roof-mounted sign, it cannot exceed the height of that one-story building structure. So the applicant is a business owner downtown, and as they're remodeling, this has come up the way that the code was in somewhat a narrow focus regulating these signs, where they had a regulation provision for freestanding signs adjacent to how you might install these two signs. Essentially, depending on which style you pick, you can manipulate that code. So this is rectifying that to say we can mount this on the roof of a building and it can follow the same provisions and count towards one of the limited numbers of freestanding signs that you'd have, pole signs on the property, versus a number of roof mounted signs. Apologize, I don't have any materials in front of me, so that's all kind of off the top of my head at the moment. So from there, maybe turning it over to the applicant to discuss the narrative a little bit further, a little bit of background, and then we could talk about the language itself once I could share a screen and actually pull it up.
Great. William, come on up.
Thank you.
If you just have a seat, introduce yourself, that would be great.
Okay.
You can stand up then if you want. We just want to make sure you're getting the mic.
I'm Will Petty. I've owned the Jailhouse Cafe for 33 years, and we're doing something new across the street. Actually, some of you have seen me within the last year because the Jailhouse Cafe is working on a big project that continues to move along.
I was just gonna say,
Well,
how's the speakeasy
Yeah,
coming?
exactly. It continues to move along. The current interest rate environment isn't very friendly to huge projects.
Yeah,
But we have a really exciting project across the street. And that is kind of why I got into this slight tangle with the sign ordinance that just doesn't seem to make much sense. And so I'm not going to waste too much of your time talking about my project, but it's Elsie's Old World Delights. And it's going to be kind of a American retro meets French or Italian coffee house with some kind of European treats. And it's in the location where the Artesian Gallery has been, and then there's the quesadilla truck that's also staying there, but it's being reoriented to the back of the lot to create more of a courtyard feeling. And that empty corner of Main Street, which formerly had a massive sign, which has now been torn down.
Yep.
Is going to become a really lovely little outdoor dining oasis with herringbone brick pavers and a striped green and white awning going along the side of the building. And so I'm very excited about this. We're seriously into our branding. We're having napkins made and all sorts of things. Anyway, I have always dreamed of creating a really beautiful neon sign. I'm like, just totally, it's something that has really excited me for a long time. And so we worked on Elsie to create this kind of conception for the sign that we want to have, facing you as you drive into town. And I worked on this with a designer I've worked with in the past, who's like, he's actually in England, and he's like, I think he's the best hand letterer in the world. And the guy who's actually going to build the sign for us is a guy called Paul Greenstein, who is the LA guru for like classic neon. He restores all of the old neon in LA. He works with the Museum of Neon, and he's going to build the sign in the old way to make it a really classic sign. And one thing that I've always loved, and this is a little bit grander than you will see at Elsie's, but this idea of like mounting neon signs on a roof using a really classic framework. And obviously we're talking about something smaller here in Moab, but that's something that I've always really loved the idea of. And so we started looking at the sign ordinance, Corey and I, and what we realized is that the way the person who designed the sign ordinance was thinking about signs was, I think maybe a little bit suburban, which is that they were thinking that every property would have like a primary sign on 2 posts, and it would be a big primary sign. And then there were like roof signs and wall signs, and these are like kind of unlimited, and as long as all of your signs together are within that square footage, that's okay, it works. But the roof signs and the wall signs, the person who designed the sign ordinance never expected that to be your primary sign. So they're sort of regulated to like blend in. The wall sign can't be above a certain height above the wall. The roof sign can't go above the roof line. But then in my case, that begs the question, what if you want to take that one primary sign that you are allowed and put it on a roof, because you don't want a big ugly sign with poles like in your dining area that you're trying to build next to your building. And so what I'm asking is an amendment to the sign ordinance that would say, okay, well, if you want to consider a roof sign to be your primary sign and not have like a sign on posts next to your building, that you can do that. And so that will count as your primary sign. And then that one sign doesn't have to meet the requirements for roof and wall signs, but it still has to meet the requirements of a primary sign. It's limited to like 28 feet. It has to be within your square footage. So it's really just this very odd idea where if I put the sign on posts, it can be this high and this big, but then the minute it touches my building, it has to just go down to like 4 feet tall. And that is the only thing we're trying to correct here. it's pretty straightforward, and I would love to take any questions if you have them.
I was able to pull Zoom back up, so we can share the amendment language just to have in the background during the discussion if you'd like.
Cool.
I might actually add something that's kind of amusing.
Yeah, sure.
But also, the sign ordinance has allowed me to get a permit for the sign over my roof, but it has required me to make the application showing 2 posts going through my roof.
Oh,
and
that's
through my dining room
funny.
into the ground. So I have a permit to do that, but it just doesn't really make a lot of sense.
Well, my question is, there's that big sign that's on top of back of Beyond, right? With the book?
Mhm.
How is that?
With that roof pitch, well, it's likely, it's certainly non-conforming,
Uh-huh.
possibly legal non-conforming,
Uh-huh.
but yeah, I think what
I
a lot
think
of Main Street.
Well, and I feel like it's,
I-
what you're talking about would be keep probably around the same height as that. Cause I mean, I pulled up like Street View, right?
Yeah, I don't,
They've got that big.
Yeah,
building
their
that's on the
sign has
road.
been there, I think, since before the sign ordinance.
For sure, for sure.
Yeah.
But what you're talking, like, just apples to whatever. we're
Yeah,
talking- I was
this
just trying
sign
to
would probably
conceptualize
be
it.
bigger.
It would be
Yeah.
just-
Oh, okay, that's great. Okay, got it.
That's actually super helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I was so busy talking, I wasn't really going through my.
No, it's okay.
But yeah, that's sort of what we're looking for. And, we're allowed a bigger sign because we've got a lot of frontage that Back of Beyond doesn't have. But it still is, it's limited to 28 feet in height. And so like, we could still do the same sign in front of our place.
Uh-huh.
So it's not really a difference in that way. I think it's just a nicer way to do it. It lets us create a really nice.
Yeah, but so what you're saying is like the hoodoo sign that was there. That is
Yeah.
basically this, but just moved into where
Exactly.
Movia
And
was.
The hoodoo sign, yeah, that's down and that's completely going away, even though you still see the base there.
Okay,
But yeah, but it's kind of like being able to do that, only doing it on top of the building.
just moving it on the roof, but it's no taller than that
Yeah.
hoodoo sign
And in fact,
was.
I think it's,
Yeah.
it's gonna be a less massive sign than that.
Yeah, because that was confusing, frankly. That sign has
Yeah.
confused me
It was a
for a
historic
decade.
offsite,
Yeah, yeah.
off
And
premises
actually, we're
sign.
not maximizing square footage on the sign.
I don't think so yet, no.
We just decided to get.
Well, it makes me think of Green River with their sort of neon
Yeah.
reinvigoration that they've done with their town sign, which I think is really cool. They've kind of got the classic neon thing going on in their downtown too now. Yeah, any questions?
Not really. I mean, it seems like a matter of placement. If we're still sticking to that 25 or 28 foot limit, and we're just talking about whether or not that sign needs to be placed out in the yard or what would be your outdoor dining area, or whether that sign can be placed over the building, that doesn't seem like a massive difference to me.
I think the real difference is probably just the setback distance from the adjacent businesses. So a sign that's on your roof would be closer to like the Desert Wild second story, basically,
Mhm.
Yeah.
than a sign that would be in the lot or in the patio area. I'm trying to think
That
like
may
why
be-
this was in
yeah.
place in the first place.
Why the ordinance is placed
Yeah,
where it was.
exactly.
My theory really is that it just wasn't considered an issue. They just thought, oh, well, roof and wall signs, they're secondary signs. I
Mhm.
think that's really kind of what was going on when this was designed.
And
I mean,
go ahead.
You do, well, you do have a point in a way that you don't want a roof sign to go in front of somebody's window, but basically, like, given the way, I guess what I would say is maybe there wasn't a roof next to that window. Maybe there was just naked ground and somebody was gonna plant a post sign there
Mhm.
anyway. So it really isn't any different,
I might add, kind of this concept is moving this actually going to be impeding on other properties. I think in this unique situation where there was a freestanding sign that is now moving closer to a building block, if we're looking at this more universally, how this would apply typically everywhere else, is those freestanding signs will typically be closer to adjacent properties, whereas the structural body or the development envelope bringing that sign back to the structure is actually going to be removing it
Yep.
from adjacency to some degree. And this is the one point, there was no staff recommendation added to this recommendation for planning commission yet. We've been mulling over how this might integrate into the larger zoning ordinance for signs, depending on zone, depending on use, a number of factors. There was nothing that I could really see. I thought the proposed language is actually, it was verbatim from the applicant. I thought was quite concise and actually did the job effectively. There's a few things we might adjust to have it align with other language pieces
Mhm.
throughout the rest of the code. But for the most part, I think it was quite elegant to effectively treat what I think the intention was here. The only thing of consideration I'm curious about is specific to zones, central commercial zone C3, for instance, where there is significantly less ability for a freestanding sign to be developed. This makes a lot more sense.
Yep.
Then again, where the buildings are back and beyond, for instance, if it's again a non-conforming sign because the pitch is a roof deck, it's not a pitch roof. How does that play in, given the roof language the way it is listed here? Considering the amount of square footage that we could be allocated towards that property, they're getting significantly less advertising space depending on how their building's set up. So every other property, there's typically enough space where it's not much of an issue. So C3 seems to be the most intensive to this particular change, but I didn't see it enough to only restrict this ability to the C3. It seems to kind of make universal sense, given that if you choose this direction, you're giving up one of your freestanding rights. It's I think, and this is not language that I was able to pull, but I think will actually hit the nail on the head, is a kind of the idea of a primary sign and then secondary, tertiary sign styles. That's really what that freestanding pole sign, a lot of people might consider that. That's the first big grab. So if you're gonna change your rights to say, well, I want my primary sign to be one of these seconds, it doesn't seem to be getting two bites at the apple. It doesn't seem to be infringing on other rights around sign ordinance or advertising or other spatial development. So there isn't anything that I could see that was really an issue from a practical perspective of installation. So this is really where I've left it quite clean for the commission to consider just broadly, does the sign ordinance effectively do its job now? Would this be an improvement, or how might you modify this so that it could meet your needs? Really kind of a full discussion.
I like giving more options based on what works with the individual property without giving more options, if that makes sense. It's like you don't get both. You know, you can't have a giant sign in your parking lot and then a giant sign on your roof. We were talking about either or, essentially. And I think this actually, I do think it, you know, if there were hesitations, I think like you said, maybe limiting it to C3 for now and seeing how that goes. But I think you're right in that if anything, this could be kind of helping encourage a little more future thinking development where there's less reliance on like giant parking lot with giant sign and with giant parking lot. You know, maybe it's a different use of space in the future. Maybe there is more outdoor usable space, patios, walkways, pedestrian areas, where it isn't just that typical. You have your building and your business and your giant parking lot and your giant sign, which would apply in other zones. C3 is all pretty condensed, but yeah, I think exactly. It wouldn't be a both, it'd be an or. So I think for that reason, it doesn't strike me as particularly scary.
I kind of like the idea of, you know, it could clean up the look of downtown a little too, not to have freestanding signs, but it seems like a cool idea to have it sit on your roof. And to me, it's just a matter of placement. If it's still restricted to the same height and the same size based on your frontage square footage and all of those same things, then we're just discussing whether or not you're allowed to place a sign over your roof in that manner, or if it has to stand on its own. And I don't see any reason it really would have to stand on its own.
One additional point I might make is that subsection B that is not being changed still restricts it to 28 feet. So regardless if it's 3 stories, you're also conceding this right. So if you're a single story building, that does give you some flexibility. 2-story building, much less flexibility depending on the roof pitch or But once you hit a 3-story in the C3,
Mhm.
it's
You
very
can't
unlikely
walk
that
there anyway.
this would be an option for you. So you're not creating view shed issues or encroachment issues over that skyline. So I think that 28 feet, maybe in the future, we could see how that adjusts if that is significant enough, or do we need to increase that height? So for 2 stories that need a little bit more room, is that 28 feet giving them enough, or is it shrinking that to a 6-foot sign, which maybe is
But then,
sufficient for
yeah,
something
going
that
back to
tall?
what Kaya said, if they want to take advantage of this and put that sign on their roof, then maybe they do have to, limit themselves to a smaller sign because they're a 2-story building. And that's just part of what they're choosing to do by choosing to take this adaptation and put the sign on the roof. And if they want a larger sign, they have to mount it out front on posts as our, code already allows for.
That's right.
Yeah, I think other question, I know that's not what we're discussing here. How would a big neon sign work with our lighting ordinance?
With the original IDA and dark sky ordinance and then our outdoor lighting ordinance, neon is actually a compliant style of lighting. I don't believe that there are lumen counts associated with the neon, so you're
Yep.
going off of illuminated area the same way you might with a channel letter boxes. But the illumination source style is actually, according to dark sky, acceptable lighting style, which I believe is because of the way that light distribution actually emanates. It diffuses so much quicker
Yep.
than an LED or something else.
Yep. Cause I mean, there are a couple apartments that would face where people live, and I'm just trying to think of being conscientious of like
Mhm.
not having a neon sign coming in their windows.
Sure, sure. And so that would also have to apply, like, we have intermittent flashing sign regulations, we have illumination, curfews, for lack of a better term. We have timeframes in which signs can be illuminated approximate to the business operation.
Exactly. So it wouldn't be all
So
night.
in theory, it would not be on all night, and depending on when the business closed, or in the C3, it may just be kind of more or less universally to, I believe it's 1 hour after business close, or I can't want to say 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. But anyway,
Yep.
there are time limitations on the illumination of some of these signs.
Just 'cause there's a couple residences over by the laundry.
Yes.
Which laundry are you talking
About like Moab Laundry Express. I know there's
about?
a residence
You mean like behind the
behind it.
jailhouse?
Yeah,
So
behind
this is
Jailhouse.
kind of facing 45 degrees out towards Main Street, so I
Okay.
don't even think it would be.
So it's almost facing like
Yeah.
Trailhead and
Yeah,
Mhm.
the
yeah, it's
Homewood
kind of,
Suites.
it's
It's
facing.
facing the Homewood Suites.
TV corner
Yeah.
across the street, yeah.
Cool.
And we're not gonna put a sign on the back of it, which is allowed under the sign ordinance.
Okay.
but There's not much point really.
Good to know. Other questions or anyone? Carolyn? Michaela?
I'm just curious if any other entities weigh in on sign permits, like UDOT or who could? The electric company. I mean, does anybody else weigh in when you guys go to approve sign permits for location?
UDOT does have some authority adjacent to their right-of-way jurisdiction, particular to billboards, which this technically wouldn't classify as. Will and I have talked about that actually through Main Street, and when we did our road safety audit just recently with UDOT, is I think they're, not to say they have not been plugged in, but their listing of right-of-way signs was like 11 on
Oh.
the right-of-way of Main Street. I said, well, clearly that's not correct. So it's a matter of so yes, there are entities that can have some discretion.
Okay.
Usually it's only if those signs are encroaching in the right-of-way typically that they get involved. But UDOT does have some additional authority that they have not been exercising over the last decade.
I can't think of any other questions I might have.
Anything else you want to share?
I don't think so. If you guys are okay with this, I'll continue to pursue it through the city council and
Yeah.
hope that it could be changed before I have to drive post through my yard.
There you go. There you go. Well, we're all excited that I saw the quesadilla movie disappear and I was like, oh no, what's
No,
happening?
it's gonna be there.
Well,
My
Will,
quesadillas. So,
Will's made a really kind of unique point here, which is in all codes perspectives, we're trying to get to the heart of, I guess, what is the intent of the
Yep.
code, but also how that actually works is within the sign code, the way it is existing. Will has mentioned this, and I kind of mentioned this as well, is there are ways in which you can mount the freestanding sign through the building. Is
Yep.
it the most convenient? No,
Yep.
but does it effectively allow what it is being proposed here through this kind of backdoor way? The answer is yes. So this allows it for a way that is, I think, more appropriately regulated, where we are doing this either or. This way, Will probably would not have done this either or situation. So it I guess to the point is this is a cleanup that is, I think, really well put together, but also it's something that if it can be done in a different way, let's do it in a way that is a little bit more clean, a little bit more straightforward.
mhm. No, I like it. Okay. I never did this, but I will do this. I will now open the public hearing at 6:28 PM on this item. If anyone is here who's recently arrived, who wants to say something on this public hearing. We did not receive any comments again, so I will close the public hearing at 6:29 PM. And now we can just discuss commission. And there's possible action, which in our packet, of course, would be to recommend this to the city council as an ordinance amendment. Any other questions, discussion, final thoughts, things we want on the record for city council to consider if we make a positive recommendation? Jill? Hello? Jill Tatton is now in attendance. It's okay. I'm glad. We're glad you're here.
No, I read this before yesterday, when it got sent out, so.
Okay, so our options are a positive recommendation, of course, with or without modifications. We can continue the action if we have specific direction we need from the applicant or staff for additional information, or make a negative recommendation of the zoning text amendment. And this would all still go to city council.
So this makes a lot of sense to me, so I am more than happy to go ahead. I move that the planning commission forward a positive recommendation to the city council on ordinance 2025-01, an ordinance amending Moab Municipal Code, section 17.93.060 roof signs.
Okay, we have a positive recommendation, a motion by Miles. Is there a second?
I can second that.
Okay, a second from Mikkel. Any further discussion from anyone? Okay, all in favor of the motion on the table, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. What was that from you? Aye. Aye, okay, I didn't see it. Okay, motion passes unanimously, excuse me, 5-0. Thank you, William. Good luck with your project.
Thanks. We hope to be open at the end of March.
Wow.
Awesome.
Cool.
Woo-woo.
I'm very discerning about my beignets, so I will coming to test them. No pressure. All right, next item tonight is number 5.1, which is an action item. Consideration and possible approval of planning resolution number 08/2024. A planning resolution approving the Whitman Special Exception Request landscaping standards for property 214 Tusher Street at Moab, Utah 84532. A briefing and possible action. Is this our 5th landscaping?
I believe it is.
Yeah.
Mhm.
We've, to that note, we don't have Lexi Lamb here to present. However, this is an item that I think is straightforward enough regarding its origins in the original, well, I guess we'll call landscape ordinance. More or less is our 70-30 impervious surface coverage. So it was tangential to the landscape ordinance that we carried through for the previous and existing code. So feel comfortable enough to discuss some of those items and where we'll likely be moving forward with situations like this and how they integrate into the code as we make our amendments to the landscape code going forward. I'm thinking it would be appropriate just to share the landscape plan really quick to give a brief overview.
How do I turn this screen on?
Oh, gosh. Sorry,
Mhm.
folks. Dang, Matt.
Oh, thank you.
Alrighty. Okay, these were submitted within the packet, and what we're looking at here is an expansion of use through an ADU, but through that is triggering the mechanism for landscaping compliance. As it's an existing property with existing conditions, that does often put us into a more difficult pinch point with some of these regulations. Specifically, when we're talking about 30/70 landscaping coverage of a front yard. Yard space being defined currently as the primary front of the structure, framing of the structure to the property boundary in the front. So not just the developable envelope, which is essentially your 15-foot setback back, but it can extend even further. And within that, within the community, there's often existing driveways that are at the appropriate driveway cuts of anywhere from 12 to 22 feet. 22 feet obviously being a little bit more standard for a two-car driveway, 12 being for a single driveway cut. With this particular situation, this request is specific to the percentage being slightly over 30% of that hard surfacing. I believe it's at 38%. And we have the applicants here that will certainly be able to provide a little bit better and specific scope, but yeah, so 38% covered to the front yard in existing hard surfacing. So outside of this one provision in full compliance with landscaping ordinance. So that's the request being submitted tonight. The additional bit of background I might include is where we're going to be taking this is we've had, I think this request, not in this same straightforward way, but in, with our street tree requirements and some of our other requests we've contemplated this 30/70 before as well. What we're seeing is within adapted use or infill redevelopment of sites like this, especially if we're expanding on the use, say it's a residence that's going single family household, increasing to a 2-household or to a single household and an ADU, which is what's happening here. The expanded use comes with additional provisions for parking, off-street parking, for instance. So at this point, we're getting this pinch point of what existing conditions might have been, single car driveway or 2-car driveway, that are conflicting with this original 70/30 split, and then also the added, the required need for off-street parking space. Where I believe we're going to be going with this and why I believe this request is in line with what our future adjustments to the administrative exceptions that we've been talking about through Alexi's review is creating a minimum threshold for these hardscape driveways. I'm sorry, bear with me guys, a little sick. Is that if the code allows for a 22 foot curb cut and our standards require for a 2-car or up to 5-car off-street parking requirement for what would be a standard lot, meaning a duplex with an ADUs could be required up to 5 spaces. There's simply just not enough room based off of a parking requirement. So what we're ending up is getting this pinch on what is kind of a static regulation based in what I'm kind of calling our mid-century code, kind of the 50s, 60s era code of 70/30, where everyone was assumed to have a 50-foot frontage with that 70/30 being on the right side, and it's just kind of cookie cutter subdivision styles. We know much of our east neighborhoods and west neighborhoods were not developed in this way. Some of them were, but many of these properties were not. So we're dealing with existing infill and adjusted use issues with this. So getting back to where we think we may set this minimum standard is the 70/30 will kick in if they're going beyond the maximum that they're allowed, 22-foot curb cut for that driveway or driveway section. So say they wanted to have a 3-car garage and they needed to have a 30-foot driveway width, that would be regulated based off their frontage. That's an excess of what their requirements typically are expressed. So if we're saying we're gonna make you park off-street for however many spaces are basic use within the zone, yet we're not gonna allow you the driveway width to do it, that you'd have to go tandem deeper into the lot, seems counterintuitive to what we're trying to allow and do, especially with ADU development, trying to be a accessible way to increase density. So hopefully you're able to help come with me on that thought process. But that's a bit of my overview on where not just this request, but where we're going to be going with future requests to have them potentially be administrative level or just written into code that you would not require a special request as long as it's within that triggering mechanism of 22 feet or less. At that point, I might stop sharing, turn it back over to the commission if you have any questions for the applicant or would like to hear more of a narrative.
Yes, if you guys want to come say anything, otherwise.
I mean, I think he explained it pretty well.
Makes sense.
Mhm.
So, excuse me, Corey, could you pull back at the landscaping
Sure.
picture again? So the ADU, I assume, would be in the backyard.
So the ADU is in that storage area on that plan.
Okay, got it, got
Not
it.
even expanding the footprint. It's-
Cool.
It's in the same footprint.
Nice.
current.
Would it be an attached ADU then, or
Yes, it's gonna be attached.
cool? Nice. Yeah, is this the house that used to have the butterflies in the front like a long time ago?
It's her house. I'm the.
Yeah. Okay.
next to the red house?
Okay, I think so. I remember when that house was for sale a while ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, it had like,
Have you not been there?
maybe, I don't know. But yeah, I was trying to picture which one it was. I was looking at satellite imagery. I mean, I think
Mhm.
this makes totally logical sense,
Mhm.
especially because it's not like you're putting the ADU where there is existing landscaping in the backyard right now and getting rid of that. It's literally on a built footprint
Correct.
already.
And we want more off-street parking. And if we're going to require parking for an ADU, then we should give people the opportunity to install that parking within reason.
Mhm.
And
You're not trying to pave the whole front yard. like,
No.
it's-
I think you're right.
Yeah, we're not-
That's really
you're not
what that
pouring
730
asphalt in the front yard
Yeah.
and paving over, making a parking lot, so.
Yeah.
It makes complete sense to me that we're allowing a 21.5 foot driveway in excess of that 18 feet. I think a 3-foot difference is reasonable.
Totally. Yeah, it makes sense to me. It seems very obvious.
Same, no, no
Mhm.
additional comments.
Jill, Miguel?
Yeah, I used to live in Tusher, so I get the narrow lots. You're kind of limited to what you have to work with, so makes sense to me.
I'm ready for Miles to make a motion.
Do you want to do it one last
Come on.
time?
Okay. Okay, I move that the City of Moab Planning Commission approve the planning resolution number 08-2024, a planning resolution approving the Whitman Special Exemption Request, landscaping standards for property 214 Tusher Street, Moab, Utah, 84532.
Okay, we have a motion from Miles. Is there a second?
I will second that.
Okay, a second from Mikkel. Any further discussion? Okay, that said, all in favor of the motion on the table, say aye.
I
Aye. Okay, motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Good luck with your project.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Awesome.
Okay, our final item of tonight, a discussion item. 6.1, consideration of the buyer's minor subdivision for the property located at 151 South, 200 East, Moab, Utah, 84532. So this is just a discussion item, so just a briefing from staff.
Yes, this is our first of transitioning into new land use authority. So at Tuesday's city council meeting, we adopted ordinance 2024-05, which updated our subdivision ordinance to comply with Senate and House bills from 2023, 2024, more or less realigning the process for subdivisions in a more efficient way for administrative approval. So oftentimes we've talked about, yes, this is administrative, meaning if it meets the codes, it has to be approved. And it kind of got to the point in the process where it was a lot of work to go through the full process. So the state has actually stepped in an effort to try to advance these in the process and not slow them down as much. So it's something that we were likely looking to do anyway. It just kind of dovetailed that it happened to be something we wanted to do, and a number of other amendments we'll hopefully make to the subdivision ordinance in the future. This is really just about the land use authority. So with that, the matrix was displayed during that city council approval. We talked about it at a previous planning commission meeting where we adjusted to the planning coordinator as the land use authority, and the advisory body, the ALUA, is the development review team. So planning commission's role is no longer necessary, but as this was going through the process and scheduled, I thought it was appropriate to finalize their process just as a briefing of, this is my exposure to DRT, so I will be after this briefing approving as the planning coordinator, but as an option for the planning commission to make comments if needed. This is a particularly odd minor subdivision, worth a little bit of discussion anyway. So I'll go ahead and share the plat. Within the review, there might have been a couple questions, especially given the conditions in which this is being approved. We've been working with these folks for almost a year, trying to get this minor subdivision ironed out and sorted out. There is an existing 2-household single property, 2 homes on a single property, owned under technically a trust situation. But as the family moved towards a will of the trust, the recipients of this property are now trying to figure out how to actually take ownership of that. So one of the siblings is hoping to take ownership of the back house, who currently maintains technically ownership over the whole lot, and the other sibling to take ownership of the front lot. This is not a flag lot subdivision. Typically, we would have suggested and required that, but as you can see, the 20-foot flag pole, as it would be, is directly adjacent to the existing home. So this is an existing situation we're trying to deal with and clean up. There's a number of reasons why this is very clunky, not something we would recommend, but as it was existing, we're trying to improve the title and deed situation for both of these sides of the lot, so to speak. So there were a number of accessory structures as well, attached patios, carports, and a number of other things, sheds. These sheds will be removed in order to create setbacks, setback compliance. This carport will remain, but with amendments that it will be cut back to maintain appropriate setback requirements of 3 feet. This carport will be removed entirely to allow for what we're seeing here is 2 types of easements. We have up front a 20-foot specifically called out emergency vehicle access and utility easement, meaning we've met with the fire inspector and building officials on site a number of times and have established that this boundary the fire apparatus would have to be able to reach this point in the property to be able to effectively circumcover the back house. They need to be able to run their hoses around each side and meet in the back. So that was the distance that was required. So that front carport would have to go. And then a single 12-foot access, which is the minimum requirement. So the fire apparatus, meaning no vehicles at any time can be parked in this place. It has to remain open at all times. Yet this becomes just an access easement toward the back lot. Our code allows for one lot to be accessed through an access easement, but no additional lots beyond that. So we would not see this divided further. There is potential to see density increase here. That would become part of the building of fires discussion, not so much of a land use. So if they wanted an ADU or something, how the density affects their ability to cover emergency services, not so much a planning situation. I don't think that's the intent from either of these folks, though. There were some additional comments from Enbridge Gas. There's some existing utilities that are technically, I believe, covered in this already existing utility easement, but as Enbridge is updated, they want to get their signature block and PUE description, public utility easement, on the plat as well. We've additionally made discussion with the property owners that typically, as their property boundary is pretty deep into the property, so to speak, this is the roadway. Typically we would have them, there's a little small fence and a little tiny brick, 1 foot brick high little wall surrounding their landscaping, would have to all be removed, as that is public right of way. Given that that is not an immediate or imminent improvement area for sidewalk, which is what we would be doing here that would require that, we would have paid to have removed all that to install the sidewalk. At this point, they're going to be signing an agreement that they will have to pay to remove all that at the time that we go and install a sidewalk, for the sake that we don't do that at this time. That was something that with Michael Black as the community development director position was able to coordinate with these owners and with the engineering department. So we feel pretty good about that. So pretty busy platting survey, but it, through all these adjustments, tweaks, separations, and removals, we're able to meet all of our statutory requirements and standards for subdivision. So feel it has satisfied all the development review team's comments, except for those that are outstanding specific to the conditions of approval. So as a discussion item, if there's any comments that the staff should be made aware of how to process these into the future, things to consider, we can take that into account. But it's likely following this meeting, I will, as the land use authority, approve this and then advance towards the conditions before we sign the plat, and then finally allow that to be recorded. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing and open up if there's any other discussion.
See, before the plating is finalized, the structures have to be.
Correct. So we've done this with our conditions of approval with plats, is we would not want them to begin demolishing until they've been approved. In the case that they demolish them now, you aren't actually approved. So in this case, we will hold the plat until inspections and verification are that all conditions have been met, at which case then we release the plat for signatures to go and be recorded by the county.
And you didn't do a flag lot because the house is too close to where the property line would have to be, and then it wouldn't meet its setbacks, and then neither lot would be. Okay,
Right.
how did we get here?
With this property?
It just kind of happened, or it's been like non-conforming for a while?
Yep. And it's in the zone. Actually, there's, not that I'm trying to advertise this too greatly, but within this particular zone, there is a way in which definitions allow for a single ownership to have multiple dwellings under the same ownership, but two separate dwellings, not attached to the duplex. That's an immediate conflict with some other aspects of our code, which say that only one primary dwelling can exist on any platted lot.
Right.
That doesn't make sense because we have multi-household dwellings. So there's a number of things that are weird. So it's not, I don't think it was eloquently or elegantly approved in this way. I think they just way back in the day set an extra house back there, and it was just old Moab type of thing. And now we're trying to improve it. Yeah, that's right.
Tell us about this process, the subdivision process we're in now. So this is the part of it that's the required public meeting.
Not necessarily. So and this is what was a little bit unique here. That's a great point. And I'd like to share that if everyone's willing to entertain me here. Just have to jump agendas really fast.
Is this is an example of how it will work in the future or not?
This is almost a courtesy review discussion item,
Okay,
given that it's a minor subdivision.
Okay.
So that's the distinction here.
Okay.
But it's kind of like this is something that would only just go through Corey now, and so now it's being. like,
Right.
Here's an example, here's our first example.
Okay.
It's probably like.
Yeah. So this is, it was, yeah, it was already scheduled in the case that city council didn't approve the ordinance. They were needing to be queued up to move through the process as it previously was. So the administrative land use authority
okay.
or advisory authority is defined above. And Lisa walked us through a lot of this.
Yes.
Administrative land use authority,
Okay.
planning coordinator. So I've coordinated with Lisa to the design review or development review team is the reviewing body that advances that. The planning coordinator, as the authority, signing authority on behalf of that body,
Okay.
is responsible now for all of these subdivision elements. Though the public hearing element is still required for some of these, at which case, in theory, we would not require the planning commission's participation at all. I think we collectively are understanding that we will be advancing those public hearings in front of the public at a planning commission meeting or prior to a planning commission meeting.
Okay. I remember that.
So the only weird piece about this is where is a minor subdivision, lots less than five, four or fewer, don't require a public hearing. So we wouldn't have seen these types of things. But if it's like an Abbey subdivision, a grander subdivision, it will be coming before you kind of just as a arena of observation.
Thanks for indulging me.
I appreciate it because I'm still working out. It was fact as I was writing this, I was like having to reboot my brain on wait, where does this go and how does this all work?
Okay, so to clarify, like it's a little messy, right?
This subdivision,
I'm just,
it certainly is.
Yeah.
It's certainly messy.
just looking at the lot, so like, they have a bunch of cars, they're not parking in that driveway anymore.
Correct.
They would-
Cause
You
that
want me to go
driveway
back
has to remain
show that?
clear for EMS.
Yeah, I can show that.
Like it's a fire lane now, basically.
Mhm.
Correct.
Yeah.
So where are we?
I'm
And if
also-
The back owner sells, it's not a flag lot, they just are relying on someone always complying with the terms of that.
Correct.
Sort of fire
The-
lane easement.
Correct. So there'll be a use and maintenance agreement associated with that as one of the conditions that will have to be recorded at the time of the plat.
Complicated for us.
That's, it was gonna be complicated, regardless. So, and this is,
Mhm.
to put it the way DRT has put it, is they weren't saying this looks good. They were saying this satisfies our comments.
Yeah,
Mhm.
And that's really what it is. But none of us think this is the way we would, advise plats in the future to be organized with the intent, but as this was an existing condition, they've met all the standards that we've had, that we've shown for them to be required to meet, and it does rectify some existing issues that were outstanding. So all in all, it's an improvement to the situation, but yeah, it's certainly messy. Like, so back to the parking issue, whereas all these carports used to be here and people parking in that drive access is right where this, I believe it's right where this patio is. So the folks in the back, they'll be pulling through this easement and then parking in the front of the property here. That was the original determination point for where that boundary was to be located, so they could fit 18 feet, two widths for conforming car space, the 9 by 18 and a half.
Mhm.
So they would have had space here to pull in and then be able to have a reverse maneuver and then pull forward egress out, not have to back down that whole space. This property is gonna do the same thing. He may build an additional carport or garage or something in the back, but they're gonna pull off of the easement and then park into the backyard of the property. So yeah, the whole driveway becomes an access way, not a park area.
Yeah, and so the front property has to then park behind the house.
Correct.
Not anywhere. They can
Not
pull
alongside.
through and then they have to turn south, basically.
Correct.
Park in that area that's like patio.
Correct.
orchard.
Correct.
It's I mean, it's kind of similar to the CR homes over on 200 north. 100 north
Yes.
on the
Yes.
corner there,
Yes.
where they have the back
Uh-huh.
home and then the duplex.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
in front.
Yeah, you're right.
Cause
Mhm.
that's, I think that's just an easement, right? It's not actually.
That one's platted and it's one of the ones I point out as something that we don't do this anymore.
Yeah.
Because that one is truly, they were being pretty flexible about lot standards with that. Whereas those are all platted areas, but access that way.
Yeah, but it's not a flag lot.
It's not by what I would call flag. And that's why I think
It's
those
not like
lots,
the back
those lots
property, the
don't,
back property does not own the driveway that goes on the side of it.
if it's the one I'm thinking of, they do.
They do.
But it doesn't meet our flag lot standards, is what I'm saying. It doesn't meet our lot standards.
What happened? That was recent,
It was, yeah, I'm not,
prior to
I think
me being. on
people,
the
I think
planning-
folks were trying to be flexible.
Right?
I think folks were trying to be flexible.
Well, I think there was some talking one building being an 80 feet too. at one
I
point.
think so, at one point, definition, changing
Yeah,
the requirements for some
I
of
mean,
those
it's
things.
fine that it works for them, but,
It's tough, and that's what the standards are really important, I think, moving forward, because we've had property owners that will move into those situations that want to make an amendment or even build a pergola or a back patio, and they can't because they've been absolutely pinched into this point where even one part of that building can't be rebuilt without the other person's participation,
Yeah.
which has been the biggest issue we've seen with some of those more creative boundaries.
I am somewhat curious too. You mentioned that the fence and that small like pony wall in the front yard encroached on city property, and I know that other developments in that area are being asked to like move their fences off of that, but that's because they're pulling building permits, and because this is a subdivision, there are no building permits involved, even in the dismantling of the sheds or otherwise, and therefore they're not being asked to comply for that now at this juncture.
Correct. I think the best way to articulate that is as a legislative plating option versus the development permit. So I think the way you've said that is accurate. So if these folks were to apply for an ADU or an expansion, we'd be looking at full compliance of the site.
Landscape and everything.
Including landscape, everything. But as this is just a plating mechanism, it doesn't lend itself towards improvements to the property except for dedications. That's why this was even contemplated, is that in theory, that area of land for our right of way is already dedicated, but wasn't being treated as such. So we just clean it up with minor subdivisions, which we've done in other places. Those places that we've had walls removed at a minor subdivision have been where the wall was where the sidewalk should be, and that is there were sidewalk on either side of that property, so it was more imminent that improvement was going to be made. Here, there's no sidewalk along that entire block, so it didn't make sense for us at this time to require them to remove it to prep for the sidewalk that won't be installed for some time. But when it is, they'll have to pay for that improvement, and it'll have to turn over whenever we're doing that.
And currently, yeah, they didn't have to pull any improvement permits because they already have the concrete poured for that easement or the fire access and all that other kind of stuff. So
they're removing structural fixtures instead of installing structural fixtures at this point.
cool. Just
Yep.
otherwise, I mean, it's messy, but it makes sense. There's only so many things you can do if you want to split that ownership. Having a weird fire lane next to your house is odd, but
yeah.
hopefully people will observe the requirement of not parking there and things will go smoothly.
It's course decision though. It's not our fault.
Yeah. People are we telling you.
Yeah, that's the part I'm not excited
I
about.
know. This is fun. Okay, thanks for the explanation, Corey. It's nice to still kind of talk through some of those, even if
Yeah.
we're not the deciding authority. Okay.
Yeah, and it sounds like it was quite the headache. So kudos to you and Michael for
Yeah.
working
Yeah.
through all that and all the coordination needed with
It
all the.
it really was. The applicants are not here. I think we invited them. I don't think we heard from today. We heard from one of them about next steps, but I don't. There's a lot of confusion. But yeah, they're kind of at their wits' end. A year to try to get this done was
Wow.
and there was a lot of time sensitive
Yeah.
things going on with that. So really happy to be moving this forward finally.
Wow.
All right, future agenda items. End of 2024?
Yes, this is our last meeting of 2024. I might also add, I think it is Mikkel's last meeting.
I want to say, Mikkel, you've been an amazing planning commissioner and thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Sincerely, you'll be missed. And if you decide to like join us again, I would be mad about that. So you should do that.
And very educational, and I appreciate you guys letting me ask all the dumb questions. Not dumb questions.
And we've had better
That's
discussions this
helpful.
year than I think we've had ever. So thank you.
Okay.
And just to echo that again, thank you so much. Moving into January, it will likely be that we have our regular meeting held what would have been our second meeting in January, as strategic planning sessions will take up the front half of that calendar month for us.
The 9th,
I was wanting to say it was the 20,
3rd,
it's the 30th, as the city council will be meeting on the 28th. So the 23rd technically would be our
meeting.
meeting date. I'll have to talk to Summer of what her thoughts are on that. Whether we push it to that 30th or keep it at 23rd prior to the city councils.
Mhm.
So no meeting on the 9th.
No meeting on the 9th for sure, though.
Okay.
With that, I believe,
I'm available the 30th as well, so right now.
okay,
Better look
and I'll try to sort that out for you
Yeah,
guys
Yeah,
as soon as I can.
any specific availability, so.
Yeah, right
Um,
now I'm free.
we're at a place within the planning division. Again, we're still in the hiring process, but also want to take the time to
Yeah.
introduce Kelsey Garcia is our planning technician.
Yay.
Kelsey is going to be joining us at planning commission meetings. She's officially within the planning division, but also serving in a similar administrative capacity that Cheryl was. So a little bit more dynamic in being able to be pulled towards the planning side a little bit more as we need it. So hopefully in the future, Kelsey will be running all of this screen stuff next time we see you guys. And as I'm looking over at Kelsey, I don't think that we're prepped on any immediate items for the January agenda. Simply that we have a lot, almost too much going on that
Yeah.
I'm within the plan division and Kelsey onboarding. We're just trying to keep up. So again, with the agenda going out last night or yesterday afternoon, I should say.
A whole day to look at it. It's.
Yeah,
Right.
it's things have been pretty darn tight, especially as development's starting to ramp up. I do know there's a couple of development agreements that are really pushing. I don't know if we'll take them through full process for negotiation purposes first before execution, which is where you would likely participate. Those are associated with some of our LIHTC projects.
Okay.
So those will be interesting to come forward. We do have a number of development level site plans that you'll be seeing soon, I would think. But yeah, nothing's jumping to mind that it's immediately queued up for that next meeting. So I just wanted to acknowledge Mikkel. I wanted to acknowledge Kelsey. But I think that's about it for future agenda items.
Cool. All right. I will adjourn this meeting at 7:07 PM. Have a great holiday, everybody.
Well, thank
Yeah.
Thanks,
see?
everybody.
Yeah, same to you all.
I feel like I don't understand how it became December. suddenly. And we also have our spy from the
Did
county
you-
planning
did you need
commission in the
anything?
audience.
Just come to watch.
No idea how it
You just came to hang out?
He's got nothing to do with his time anymore.
I was like, oh, he just came to watch.
All right. Well, if we're adjourned, we'll stop recording. Thank you.
Spy from the county.
Yeah, exactly.
Jealous? Oh, yeah.
Shoes on the other foot. Yeah, nice.